Is it now working? Yes.
I started it for you.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So, welcome to our Abundant Good Journey for September 2024. It's so good to see each and every one of you here. I'm so glad that we're all back together again after our summer break. And so, our topic for this month is the energy of positivity. And I want to thank Richard in particular for inspiring this topic because, you know, a couple weeks ago, we were talking that wherever we go, we tend to meet all these very interesting, inspiring, kind people. And that even happened last night when we went to the Hollywood Bowl for this concert. And we just met all these amazing people and had great conversations. And I told him it's because of the energy that we bring to wherever we go. And that's what attracts the energy back to us. And so that inspired this idea of the energy of positivity. So I really appreciate each and every one of you for showing up. And as we like to do before we start our time together, we like to do an opening prayer. And so there is a question that I like to pose for every prayer for you to be able to answer. So the question for this time is, what is one positive experience you had this summer? And so go ahead and take a moment and just put it in the chat. I know that there isn't a lot of room to type out the whole experience, but just something highlights that we could go ahead and share in our prayer. So take a moment, just type in like, what is one positive experience you had this summer? Mm, these are very nice, very nice. Wow. Okay. So nice, so nice. All right. Oh, these are nice. These are nice. All right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play our music to get us into that space. And let's see how it goes. And so let's go ahead and start by closing our eyes and taking a deep breath, breathing in and out. And just allowing the breath that breathes all of life to breathe us. Because there's always only one thing going on, and that's the infinite power and presence and love that is always present. This unbridled joy, well being, peace, harmony, abundance, prosperity, joy, all things good. The nature of all life always expressing and activating as each and every person here, because each one here is an emanation and expression of this one life. And so, knowing that all things are good, we call forth all that goodness into our time together today. We have been experiencing an expansive and joyous summer. And so, we give evidence to that joy in our comments, in our hearts, in our memories, as we add those to our collective circle here today. And so naming those joyous, positive experiences this summer of being able to travel with beloved family, of being vertigo free, of reconnecting with family and friends, of being in a beautiful canal cruise at sunset in Amsterdam, having a short conversation on the cruise ship with a fellow passenger about the healing from the loss of his mom, spending time with family, welcoming more and more people into our spiritual community. And of course, getting married and going on a honeymoon cruise. All of these are evidence of the good that is always available and revealing itself in our lives, because that is the nature of life itself, this unfolding, activating, always expressing good. And so I know that good continues in our time together today as we gather to explore this idea of the energy of positivity so that we continue to radiate that which is the natural order of life itself and have ripple effects into the far reaches of the universe. And so I'm giving thanks for this time together today, calling it good. All we need to do then is simply relax, to be, to open to the possibilities unfolding, and just letting it rest and be. And so with that, go ahead and take a deep breath in and out. And then whenever you're ready, you could gently open your eyes. All right. And so, how'd you like that new music? Different, right? Yes. Nice to have some change, right? So, yeah. Um, so I want to go ahead and share um, my screen here. Go ahead and take out your insights, ahas, and notes. And these are, as you know, if anything comes up for you, go. This is your chance to put down whatever wants to come up. And then also take out this sheet here, the energy of positivity, because this is the worksheet that we're going to be working through today. And so this is a very interesting topic because, as you could already see from the first question, that there is something interesting about when we talk about positivity. It also brings up this idea of negativity, right? In this law of polarity, opposites. That so, what exactly is positivity? And we always do it in comparison to looking at those things that are not so positive. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so a lot of this will be some teaching for you, and then we'll actually have our experiential exercise. And so um, here's the first thing, negativity bias. Let me just ask from a raise of hands here. Who here has heard of negativity bias before? Lesia, Glenn, Heather, um, Mandana. You didn't raise your hand, but I know we talked about it. So um, and then, oh, Leslie raised your hand. Let me lower your hand. These Zoom things. Yeah. And so negativity bias, it's very interesting because um, this is something that Lesia and I had studied in a course together in advanced consciousness studies. And it was really looking at this idea of neuropsychology. And it asks why we think the way that we do and how can we change based on knowing this thing about neuropsychology. And what negativity bias says, as you can see here, it said that we have a tendency to focus on the negative. And here's a little bit more about it. It says that even when positive or neutral things occur, things of a more negative nature have a greater effect on one's psychological state and process than positive or neutral things. So essentially, what this means is all things being equal, you have positive things going on, negative things going on, neutral things going on. Our brains have a tendency to focus on the negative things first or foremost. That's sort of like how we tend to go. And so this was an eye opener for me because I thought our brains were neutral. Like, and that it was a shock because I thought we live in this loving universe. Why do we want to focus on the negative, right? And so, um, I'm just curious to hear, like, you know, Carrie, if you could unmute for a second, and I just want to like shine a light on you. So, Carrie, like, is this idea of a tendency to focus on the negative, is this shocking to you? Like, what comes up for you as you hear about this for the first time?
Um, I just feel like from what it says, like, well, something I tend to do. It's like when you are in a negative space, you kind of tend to spiral.
Hmm.
And I think it's more, sorry, I was like thinking I had another question in my head. Um, I don't know the segues out, but okay. So for example, it's not okay. The way I was brought up with my mom, she's always very careful with things, like be careful, be safe, whatever. And I don't know how much of that is okay, being negative or being careful. Like for example, we had a microburst in the neighborhood, and a lot of trees are falling down, and um we have another project coming, and instead of being like, okay, we're going to do this, it's like, what if, we take down this limb and it damages something, or like, and thinking all these careful things versus like, oh, it'll be fine, we've done this so many times and it'll be fine, like, I don't know, sorry, I don't know that like segue out of your question.
It relates, yes, yes, yes. And so I'll make a note of that. So yeah, so this idea of yeah, be safe, be careful, watch out, like, and even though you might have done this many, many different times, like there's this focusing on like what could go wrong, right? And what you have to do to take care of yourself. So yeah, thank you for that. Anybody else have any comments or thoughts just about negativity bias before we go into like how it actually shows up into your life? Like, is this surprising for you? Is this like Heather's like, no, this is not surprising. Like, Heather, do you want to like share?
I was just thinking about it in the terms of like how is it protecting us and keeping us safe? Because I feel like it kind of all goes back to that.
Hmm.
So I don't know, maybe like our brains mean well, but we just have to train them that like we are safe and it's okay, and we can also acknowledge positive things.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So thank you. So that actually we'll
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that. And so let me just share like what negativity bias looks like in our everyday lives so you could see how it shows up. So um one is that we tend to remember traumatic experiences better or more than positive ones. And so an example could be say you were in a group of people and you felt like you humiliated yourself in front of that group from years ago, and then you can still vividly recall that event, right? So you could like as fresh as day. And then as you think about it, you find yourself cringing with embarrassment over it, even though your friends or family and the people you're with probably forgot about it a long time ago, right? But we tend to like remember those moments where like, oh God, why did I do that? Like, and so that's an example of how negativity bias shows up, where we remember those kinds of humiliating, traumatic experiences more than the positive things that could be happening, right? Even like when people think about their childhood, right? They'll tend to focus on the negative things that happen, and then there may have been all these positive things that showed up, right? Um, Let me show you a different way. And if you have any like thoughts you wanted to share about this, like go ahead and just unmute or raise your hand and let me know. Um, the other one is recalling insults or critiques better than praise. Does anyone relate to this? Yes. Madonna, like, could you unmute and just share, like, I see your head nodding. Like, how do you
I shouldn't
relate?
have nodded. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking back to I guess elementary school and kids on the playground, and even parents and family. Think just kind of going back a little bit to what Carrie was saying. Um, I think, I mean, it's so environmental, right? There's a lot of environmental conditioning, and the people that you're surrounded with, the types of experiences that you have with them, I think is really formative for better or for worse. So, yeah, I mean, insults and critiques definitely takes me back to grade school.
Yeah, yeah. And those are our formative years. Yeah, thank you, Mandana. Like, where then, yeah, those have a lasting, can tend to have a lasting impact on our lives as we recall those, right? It could even be more recent, right? So, how many of you here have ever gotten a job performance review or job evaluation, right? And then there may have been all of these positive things that said, oh, you're great and you do this well. And yet here's the one thing that you could work on, right? And then then the focus afterwards is like, oh my God, there's that one thing that I like that I didn't do, right? Or that I could have done better. And we fixate on those remarks. And so rather than feeling good about the positive aspects of the review, there's a tendency then to focus and feel upset and angry about these critiques that happen, right? So these are examples of the way that the negativity bias just shows up in our lives. And part of it is, as I'm going through these different examples, I just really want to emphasize, a lot of people will sometimes feel like, why am I feeling this way? I don't want to feel this way. Well, this is why you're feeling this way. And it's not because you're a bad person. It's because there's a negativity bias that exists in humans. And there's a tendency to feel this way. And so give yourself a little compassion if this ever comes up for you, because it's just the way we've been wired, which I'll talk about a little bit later, why we are wired that way. And so here's another way. We react more strongly to negative stimuli. And so an example of what this means is that, say you want to pursue a goal. So rather than focusing on what you can gain from the goal, there's more likely that we're going to focus on what we're going to be giving up in order to achieve that goal. Like, what's the negative of me not doing this? Or what's the loss of me if I don't do this, right? And this is where a lot of FOMO shows up, the fear of missing out, right? Because, oh, if I don't do this, then I'm going to miss out. And so we will respond more to the negative stimuli versus the positive stimuli of like, this is what it's going to give me, right? And here's another example. Thinking about negative things more frequently than positive things. And so here's an example of that. Say you had an argument with someone who's close to you, and afterwards, then you start focusing on that person's flaws. And so that's the thing that you focus on as you think about them. And so that they may have all of these positive attributes, but all we can think about are predominantly are the negative qualities. And so it could come to a point where any even trivial or minor flaws become amplified because we're focused on that. They sort of start to create a big ball, like all the different thoughts that we had, negative thoughts start to come together, and we paint a picture of this person. Um, and so that we tend to overlook the positive characteristics. Okay. And then lastly, this one, there's a tendency to respond more strongly to negative events than to equally positive ones. And so I put here this picture of breaking news, right? Because um, due to the negativity bias, negative coverage grabs our attention more, grabs humans' attention more than positive coverage. And there's a reason for that, why news coverage does that, because the more eyeballs on your news, the more business, right? But there's a reason why there's all this focus on negative stories versus positive stories, okay? And so these are all different examples of the way negative bias shows up. And let me just pause for a moment and then just see what is coming up for you uh, as I'm sharing these. As you hear these, do you relate to some of these? Do you find yourself experiencing some of these? Um, Anybody? I'd love to hear from someone. Lesia, I'd love to hear from you.
I knew you were gonna pick me.
Yes, I knew, because you had that. He's gonna pick me look.
I
was like right being back in class with Dr. James going, I know
Yes.
he's going to pick me.
Yes.
So what I have to say that I am just so delighted by for myself is knowing where I was for most of my life and knowing where I am now. And that even though negativity bias is a thing and we're hardwired for survival and looking for danger lurking around every corner, just in case, erring on the side of caution, that's not my go-to anymore. And so even when you were talking about the performance review, which I'm actually about to get at VTC because it's been almost a year since I started as spiritual director. And the only reason I'm getting that performance review is because I asked for it.
Okay.
Because otherwise it's like, you're doing great, fantastic, it's awesome. Is when you said, like, yeah, it could all be good, but then there's one thing. I mean, that took me the Gary Keller's book, The One Thing. And for me, it was like, wow, only one thing I get to focus on and, like do better. That's what it felt like for me with a little smiley face rather than, oh my God, So it just, it's taken a lot of conscious attention and work and all of it has to do with my spiritual journey and consciousness studies and just shifting my focus, changing my perspective, knowing that what I focus on expands and consciously choosing, this is what I want to expand. This is what I want to experience more of, not this. And so even though that may be a built-in tendency, it's not my automatic tendency anymore.
Oh, I love that. Let's give Leslie a hand for that. Leslie just gave our whole lesson already, and that's there. So, thank you, Lesia. Yeah, anybody else just have anything that they want to share? Just like what this brings up for you, like this, how it shows up. Is it surprising? Is this, Lesia has recognized that this is something that is a tendency, but it doesn't mean that we have to actually own it or buy into it. But just this idea
I
that,
have a thought.
yeah, please, Amy.
I think about, because I teach a lot of heart coherence exercises with my clients, how to move into a more positive, balanced state. And one of the things that is so interesting because it's so common. I mean, it was with me too, or is sometimes still. But like there's that, okay, we notice that, I'm in fight or flight or I'm in some kind of negative state. And I ask myself, oh, I have a choice. Now I have a choice because I have some tools to change that. But the next question is, do I want to? It's so interesting because we actually have to ask that question, and you think you wouldn't have to, but we do, because sometimes we're just like, no, I just feel like being mad. I'm just going to be mad right now, or I'm just going to feel bad. I'm going to wallow in it. So I just think it's really interesting how, we get some kind of pleasure current sometimes out of staying in it, or maybe sometimes there's a need to process that way first. I don't know, but it's interesting.
That is interesting. And so you're saying that there's a point where you actually get an awareness that you're having this response of being mad or whatever. And then you say, oh, so now I have a choice. And do I want it? Do I not want it? And sometimes we actively choose to stay in it, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to do the tools and go into a nicer place. I'm going to stay here.
I love that. Thank you. That's good. And Richard, please.
I have an observation. I think about this, and then we have these conversations, you and I. But I think that the more I have experiences, positive experiences, those moments in conversation with someone, they're very spiritual moments. And I think that I'm helping this other person, right? Maybe navigate through some difficult times. It's also feeding me. It's feeding my soul. And the more I recognize that, the more I see the contrast between negative and positive energy. And the more I feel more open to having more positive experiences. And that then depletes, or I see the decline of negative experiences or negative energy. So it's almost being in gratitude for the positive experiences. The more I go there, the less the negative energies pop up.
I love that. Thank you, Richard. And so it's interesting, what I'm going to note in our time so far is like there's a tendency in this group to already start to move towards the positive. Here I am talking about negativity, like, well, here's how I've overcome it, and here's ways we can do it. And like, I'm like, okay, so this group is already talking about, no, it's great. It's great because it already shows that there are certain ways of behaving and thinking that are automatic for us, right? Or that have become more part of our habits and practices. Um, so we'll get to that. We'll get to the practices, right? But um, but it's something I just want to note that from the comments so far, there already is this bubbling up of like, wait, we don't have to stay there, right? Or we could choose how we want to be. And so, Heather, I want to go back to you because you were talking about like why we have why we might have negativity bias in the first place. And could you share what you were saying earlier about why you think we have it, why we experience it?
I think like a lot of like our automatic sort of responses are like survival responses, like to
Mhm.
protect us. So I
Mhm.
think that might be part of what the negativity bias is. And
Mhm.
then I was just thinking when Richard mentioned gratitude, like maybe this is one of those things that are just like automatic. And if we kind of embrace it and show, like be grateful for it because it's just trying to protect us, and then move on. So like maybe that's the initial sort of response, but then we kind of understand where it's coming from, kind of like transform it a little bit.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that you don't have to look at the negativity as a bad thing.
Mhm.
You're saying, oh, like the negativity bias is here to protect us, it's trying to serve us in some kind of way. And so we could also say thank you. In
Yeah.
your comment, you said next. You're
Yeah.
like, what can I choose here instead, right? If I want to
Yeah.
choose something different. Yeah, yeah, I like that. Um, and the other way to look at it too, just adding to what Heather said, is not only can you see it as to say thank you and next, but we could actually also say thank you for making it clear to me what I do want to experience instead. That like this negativity bias or being aware of it is saying, wait a minute, I don't want that. I want this instead. So, oh, you're playing a role in helping me to clarify what I do want instead, that negativity bias. So it's just a different way of looking at it. And then Amy says, I like that I like that. Mandana and Heather saying, thank you for giving me this information. Now I will focus this way. Yay. Group learning. I love that. Group sharing. And so let me go back to let me finish the effects of negativity bias in our lives. And I'll be honest with you. When I was creating these particular slides about the ways negativity bias was showing up, I was like finding my energy just go down. I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel good. And um, so yes, it has an impact on us. All right. And so we answered why do we experience negativity bias? And so what is the actual effect? How does it affect our lives? So one is negativity bias can, if we buy into that bias, affect our relationships. So how it affects it is if we don't address it, we can actually start to expect the worst in others, particularly in our close relationships in which like we've known people for a really long time, whether that's like in our family or coworkers or bosses, we could start to expect the worst. Um, you might negatively anticipate how somebody's going to react to something, and so that your defenses will go up because you already are think that's going to happen. And so what ends up happening is arguments or resentments like are the results in those kinds of relationships. Um, you know, sometimes we'll focus on one bad incident that happened in a particular relationship, and that then colors how we see that person. And so that's how it could actually impact our lives. It impacts our work. I was talking about work. So sometimes it'll make it harder for us to accept constructive feedback. Sometimes it could hamper us building trust with people in our office or our colleagues. Um, Sometimes it'll impact us encouraging others. In terms of health, it could actually have physical health responses like anxiety or depression, increased heart rate, more stress. Um, Decision making, it could, it could hamper us by avoiding taking risks because we'll say, oh, something bad's going to happen, so I'm not going to do that. Or, you know what, I'm not going to cut that limb off that tree because it's going to fall on me. So, so we won't do certain things because we're afraid of the risks it'll take. Or on the other hand, remember I was talking about FOMO, fear of missing out. Sometimes like we'll just say, well, I gotta buy this instead because if I don't buy it, then my life is going to be bad without it. And that's where a lot of impulse shopping comes by, is like this fear we're going to miss out and like not have what we need to be happy and healthy and successful. Um, and then it impacts first impressions that we have on people. So sometimes, when we meet somebody for the first time and then something doesn't sit right, then we might just think, oh yeah, that first time I met them, I got bad vibes from them. So now they're like a bad person. So that could affect that. This focus on dwelling on dark thoughts. Um, like this tendency, if left to its own devices, it builds its own momentum so that you start to think of a negative or dark thought, then pretty soon afterwards, another dark thought will join it. And then pretty soon after that, another. And then talking about the spiral, that's when we go down the spiral and the dark thoughts start to become one big dark thought. And then it makes it difficult to maintain optimism. Like I was saying, it's like when you gain momentum, it's hard to stop that moving train. Like once things have that kind of momentum, it's going to carry on. It has inertia. So we want to be able to figure out when we try to combat it. That's why it becomes very difficult to combat it if you're already on that train that's moving 100 miles per hour. Okay. But here's the since we've already been talking about how to get out of it, I wanted to share this quote from Michael Beckwith. So Michael Beckwith, if you don't know him, I've mentioned him before. He's the spiritual director of the Agape International Spiritual Center here in Los Angeles. And this is what he had to say. He said, when the mind is untrained, it develops a negative bias that looks for the negative in life. It becomes trained to look for hindrances and blocks. Okay. So the operative word there is untrained. Okay. So it says that if we don't train our minds, it automatically moves towards this negative bias. Okay. But here's what he also says. He says, you are here to break free from the negative bias and to train your mind and yourself to be in gratitude and thanksgiving and to look for something to be grateful for until that becomes a habit. Okay. So let me just pause here and just see if anybody has any response or reaction to this quote and sort of in line with what we've already been talking about, this negativity bias. Who haven't I called on yet? Glenn. That's a good one. Glad. Yes. So what comes up when you see this quote here?
Well, the one word that comes up is expectation. So when Lassie and I were a few years back figuring we're going to do a podcast and what should we call it, my instinct was to call it something like, what were you expecting?
Mm.
Meaning like whatever's happening in your life, whatever's going on, what did you expect? Like what did you assume was going to happen in life? And I can turn it to me. What if this is happening? This is a reflection of what I assumed was going to play out, you know. And so this it's interesting in this group, as you mentioned, Joselito, already we're on that line of like the the yin yang. You got the positive, negative, and if you can stay on the line and like see the perspective of, well, this is only one half of the story, and if I zoom out a little bit, I can see that it's the pattern right now, but it can just flip and become the other thing. So if I can intentionally place my focus on the good or betterment, or if I can expect the whole thing of things are always working out for me. If I can stay within that kind of vibration, then I kind of disentangle from this juicy, delicious drama, horrible, oh my God, this is happening. Like, even I'm being very rational on one level, and like assuming I know I'm in the conversation, I'm listening, and I've got examples of how I can kind of um stay centered, whatever. But my mouse, I have a new laptop, and I haven't figured out how it interprets the internet yet. And I was hovering over something on the bottom right, and it's giving me two options on internet connection, and my part of me went, what? I don't have an internet connection. It's saying that it's like there's another option, and like the one we normally use, like my part of my brain said, it says it's not connecting to the internet. And I was like, well, this is interesting. Why is my, I've got an example of, I can go the way of like my laptop knows what it's doing. I'm just an observer, or I can like dive into the worry.
Yeah.
So yeah, so back to this, it's just expectation. And if I can train myself to expect better, then
Yeah.
I assume it'll play out that way.
Yeah, so there are a couple of words that you use. One was intention, right? Being intentional about it. And then two, expectation, right? Because what we expect then tends to be what we experience. So the level of expectation that we have really reveals the state of being that we're bringing to a situation. And so, Heather said that that was a great name for a podcast. And do you want to share what the name of your podcast is?
Who do you think you are?
So that is the name that they settled on. So take a listen to it.
You look
Yes.
up Joselito, and then who do you think you
Who do
are?
you
You'll
think you
see
are?
a little interview. Yeah.
Yes, I was interviewed on the podcast. So
Yeah.
yes, thank you. Thank you. Nice plug for Glenn and Lesia's podcast. So, all right. And so let me just talk then a little bit about this question. What are ways that you can train your mind to embrace positivity? We already started talking about this because you all are advanced students already and wanting to get to that. So let me just share some of the different ways that you can train your mind, because that's the thing, right? Lesia was talking about it. There's something about her spiritual practices and the things that we do that moves away from the bias. Like, just because you have a bias towards something or tendency towards something doesn't mean that that becomes your reality. So you actually have to train your mind intentionally and consciously in order to experience something different. So here are some different ways that you could do that. So one is really looking at self-awareness and challenging negative self-talk, particularly all or nothing thinking. So self-awareness and challenging negative self-talk, that means like exactly what Amy was saying. Sometimes we become aware when we're saying we're not feeling good, or we're thinking about something negatively, especially negative self-talk. And so then that's where you get to choose. Like, what do I choose to like, do you have a choice, and do I want to keep on experiencing this or not? And sometimes we'll choose to keep on experiencing it until then we decide not to, right? And then, but that self-awareness is one of the first tools. And then this thing, all or nothing thinking. What do you think that means, all or nothing thinking? Let me see. Let me ask Antoinette. What is, when you think of all or nothing thinking, like, what does that mean to you?
It's sort of that you only have kind of two options. It's all black or white, and there's no really in between response, or sort of you're not able to negotiate your response. And I think that's sometimes some people's way of thinking versus, and they're sort of stuck in one particular response to do something. So and sometimes it's hard to get out of. So
Yeah,
Has helped.
so there's like black and white thinking, like there's only two options, and that because they only feel like they only have one choice, they really can't see any other options, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Um, you know, the other thing about all or nothing thinking, there are two words that help to reveal whether you have all or nothing thinking, and that's if you use the words always or never, right? Those are two words to just be mindful of. Like, I'm never going to lose weight. Okay, that's one way, right? Or you always do this, right? Has anyone ever said that in an argument? So that's all or nothing thinking, right? And so and that really boxes in your choices and it also limits the possibility for resolution, right? And so just be mindful of those kinds of words if they come up, because, I know they've come up in my life. So let's see, be intentional about your environment, okay? So how does this help to train your mind? Well, here's some examples. Like, do you watch TV? Do you scroll through social media? Do you read? What is the energy of the things that you're taking in, that you're reading, that you're watching, that you're reading through? Who are you surrounding yourself with? What's that environment? What's the energy level of that? Look at where you go. Are the places that you go uplifting? Are they affirming? Or are they draining or depleting? What's the energy of the environments that you spend time with? Like think about nature. Does that uplift you? Or think about something else. So be intentional about your environment. Let me ask this of Richard. Richard, like what's an up like when you think about your environment, like what comes up for you when you think about like how am I being with my environment? Like am I spending time in things that uplift me, that bring me down? Like go ahead and unmute.
Oh, I don't know. That's a tricky question.
Well, just pick
Of
one environment.
um, be intentional about your environment. Whether I'm waiting for a bus or whether I'm watching something negative happening down the street, um, I usually go to a sense of gratitude,
Mm.
a sense of, I'll look at the birds, I'll look at the trees in downtown Los Angeles, and there are birds. But when you're in the negative state of mind or neutral, you don't see that. You don't hear them chirping. But I get to sit down and have coffee and find a bird and listen to them chirp, looking at them talking to each other. And I then say, thank you, God, for giving me this little moment of appreciation of your beauty in the middle of all this stuff in downtown Los Angeles. And I try to really work on that. And I do a lot of that. And that's my survival skill in keeping me focused on the sense of where I'm at and who I am and who I can be.
I love that. And can you see why when Richard listens to the birds chirping, right? It's like that was such a powerful insight, right? Like if you're not in that space of being open, then we're missing out on all of these great things that are happening, right? And so the birds are chirping whether or not you hear it, and so you could tune into that. And so then is it a surprise then that Richard comes across people who are kind and inspiring because he's tuned into that, right? He can hear that. And so he said he works hard at it, meaning he's been training his mind, he's been practicing this. So it's something that he does for, like he said, his own survival, but for his own peace of mind, right?
Can I just add one more thing because
Yeah.
this is my aha moment. I need to share it with all of you. So
Okay.
all of you know, or you may not know, I'm a recovering alcoholic. And from this session, I'm learning a lot because I've been sober 35 years. How I was 38 years ago is different than I am today. But in looking at the power of negative energy and positive energy, what I've learning from this session, when we're talking about addiction, we're also talking about compulsive behavior. And so when a person has an addiction issue, and not everybody does, it's hard to get out of the negative space. And so they think bad of themselves, they had horrible experiences, and they just beat themselves down into the ground. And so for them, drinking and using is a way of medicating, of healing. And so when you get sober, that's why they sometimes say when you're in 12-step program, that helps your addiction or your 12-step, your abuse issues. But sometimes you need psychotherapy to deal with all the issues that you need to heal from. And so it's a whole process until you get to that place of thinking positive all the time. So sometimes when we see people down the streets who are dealing with addiction issues, it's not because they're just addicted to the medication and I mean to chemical dependency. It's because they're beaten down. And sometimes they need to be lifted up to get out of that space. That's my observation because that's what I've learned from this about myself over my life.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Richard, and for being honest and vulnerable and for your insights. That's heart from Lesia and Antoinette and everybody. So and so there's something like there, especially when we find ourselves in times when we're distraught and beating ourselves up, it's nobody wants to stay in that space. And so we look for what can comfort us. And so some people will look for substances, right, as a way to heal that, right? But what we're saying is that, well, maybe there are other ways that can get to the root of this, right? That can help to move from that state. And and I really have a lot of compassion for people who do use substances, right, as a coping mechanism, because there really is this desire to want to get better. And so it's just, what are like, and so looking at our journey as really like there's a journey that we go through. There's steps that we're going, there's a pathway and a process. And so as there's a desire then for people to feel better about life. And so how can we have some compassion for that as well? And for Richard, you had your own journey to get you to what it took and what it takes for you to be 35 years sober now, which is a great accomplishment. So thank you, Richard. So sweet. So then, so the other word, another way to train your mind is reframing, this idea that, reframing has you looking at things rather from a problem-oriented perspective, is looking at things from a solution-oriented perspective. So sometimes, that saying like we can't solve a problem at the same level of consciousness that created it. When you're caught in the problem itself and you're trying to figure out how do I resolve this problem, like we tend to attract and the energy of that same problem. But you got to think of like, well, what's the solution? Meaning, how do I want to feel in this experience? Like, what's possible here? And what can we experience here that's positive? That starts to reframe it and help us to think about a different way of approaching a solution. So, an example of reframing is, somebody gets laid off, right? And think, oh, my world is going to end. And then the reframing is, well, you know what, this job that laid me off led me to a better job that's more aligned with who I really want to be. So there's like different ways that you could look at past situations and reframe it so that you could think, okay, I could see the lessons and beauty here. Okay. Another set of practices, engaging in activities that bring you joy. Isn't this cute here? So Carrie, I'm going to ask you again. So name one activity that brings you joy.
Sorry. Hi. Yeah, of course, being in my garden.
Being in
that
your
front yard,
garden.
my garden,
Yeah. And what specifically in your garden do you like doing?
Oh, any anything, just there's a bunch of tasks to do all the time, whether it's seeding, sowing, weeding, mulching, pruning, and I've really gotten into native plants with my garden journey. And it's so if for those that know, native plants basically support our biodiversity here. We have a lot of plants in our gardens are all from like other continents, so it doesn't support our native bees and butterflies and stuff like that. So I really gotten into that. And so with me cultivating the garden, which started as a vegetable garden for us, I'm cultivating nature. Like I'm seeing monarchs and like a few praying mantises in our garden, and just like all these different species of butterflies that I haven't seen the first year here. So it's been super cool. So like, yeah, it's just not one thing. It's anytime I'm in the garden doing something, I really enjoy it. Even when we had the microburst and it took down like 4 or 5 of my big sunflowers in my trellis, it was weird. I was telling Michael, I was like, I'm not sad. I'm not saying. He's like, are you just telling me stuff? I'm like, no, I'm just surprised that I'm not sad. Like I feel like in the first year I would be crying because it took me hours to put up that trellis and we lost 4 cucumber plants. But I was like, Mother Nature gave the garden and she took it down, and it was a good she forced me to like clear things out, because as the sun, as we're having less daylight, it'll make room for more sunlight for the plants that are still there, that we want to continue to thrive.
Oh, I love that. So, like Antoinette said, I can feel the joy in how you describe it. How to think very cool. How many of you could feel the joy in Carrie as she's like this? Yeah, it's like, and how many of you could feel like Carrie could talk more about this? Like, yeah, like I didn't know about native plants. I'm like, oh, okay, very interesting. So, thank you, Carrie. That was really nice. All right. Let me move through these other things because I want to have us do our experiential piece. So yeah, savoring the positive moments. Like, just think about like how often do we actually do like what Richard did, which is like to listen for the birds chirping. Like, like the positive moments that are there, just like even having a good meal and then just savoring it, milking it, just like being present in it. It's okay to do that. We don't always have to move towards the next thing that's got to be done. Like, because that's life. This is actually what life is all about, right? And then there are practices that we could do, right? Spiritual practices. So I know that a lot of us here have our own different spiritual practices. So I'll just name some of them, like mindfulness and meditation is one, because it really helps you to get clear on what are the thoughts going on in your head. It helps you to develop self-awareness, but it also helps you to commune with something deeper, maybe bigger than who you are. Gratitude and thanksgiving. That's one of the big practices, right? Being grateful for the big things and the little things, for life, for little moments. Gratitude is one of the best practices to train your mind to embrace positivity. Affirmative prayer, that's a tool that some of us use, where we actually use prayer to affirm what we know to be true. So that's helpful. And then scripting. So this is actually want to talk about scripting. Has anyone here ever heard of scripting? Yeah, Amy, okay. So scripting is this practice where you uh it's where it's almost like writing out like a script, like something in the future that's going to happen, but you write about it in a way that's the most positive, like the best outcome. Like it's like intentions, but you actually go into detail, like you detail like what's happening from the, you know, when I wake up in the morning, like I turn on the coffee maker and I smell the aroma of the coffee, and then I pour it and I put my stevia. Well, this is me, my stevia. Um, but just like, and so you write the best possible like emotions, feelings. So, I just put the example here. Alex and I are on a date in my favorite Italian restaurant. The live band is playing a romantic song. While Alex tells me about his day, we both ordered the spaghetti, and I can't help but but think of the date scene in Lady and the Tramp, so it's like, this is like an example of scripting, right? And so you could do this for your life, you could do this for your day, you could do this for a particular experience that's going to happen. Scripting is actually a tool that a lot of top athletes use. They will actually use this as a practice, and not only for the game that they play, but actually for their practice and for their game, they'll actually do this practice. And I know because like someone I know is a coach to these top athletes, and he has them do this, like to like Serena Williams, and yeah, this is like a written visualization. And so yeah, it is a form of visualization, but it's a little bit more detailed, right? And so what I want to do is just give us the experience of scripting. So here's what I want us to do, and I'm going to break us out into different groups, and it's going to deal with the third question on your worksheet. And so I want you to think about one positive experience that you'll have in the next couple months. I want you to pick one thing that you know that you're going to experience. And I want you to pick something that you already feel like is going to be good, right? We're getting practice here, so don't pick a challenging experience, right? Just pick one thing that you know, like, you know what, I think this is going to be good. Like, and it doesn't have to be major. It could be even like, like I'm going to be getting a massage tomorrow, or I'm going to get my hair cut. Right, Mandana? Like who got a really beautiful haircut recently. But just like just something that or I'm going to go travel somewhere, or I'm going to go just pick one experience, or our daughter is coming to visit, right? Leslie and Glenn. So just pick one positive experience, and then this is what you're going to do in your group, is that you're going to describe it in the best possible terms, right? And so you're going to sort of give it life and essence by including emotions and details, like, and so this is what's happening, and then we also want to say it in present terms, okay? So we're just going to pick one experience, and we're not going to have a lot of time to do this, but just share. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to break us out into um, three three groups, so that we're going to have three, and two. Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing. So you have this down, right? So what you'll do is you'll each get a chance to just share one experience, and then just describe it. Don't talk about why it's positive. Just actually describe the experience. And then this is what's happening, and I see this, like, and then you'll have a chance to switch, right? Any questions about this? No.
So one question real quick. So this is not already planned. It's something you're going to do.
No, it could be something that you already have on the calendar that's
Okay.
planned. But then you describe it in the best possible terms. Like, I know that Richard and I are going on a cruise to London, out of London in October. So like you could choose that one, just say, yeah, we get on we go to London, and then we see Big Ben, and it's like, I'm so excited, that's an example. Glenn, yes.
Yeah. Are we saying it out loud to each other? Are we writing?
Yeah, no, we're going to
Writing
say it
it,
out
or-
loud. Yeah. So this,
Okay.
we're not going to write it. This one is
Okay.
like once you're in your group, one person will start sharing. Okay, I'll start, and then I'll just say, like, this is the experience, and just describe the experience itself, not why you think it's going to be great, but describe in detail. This is what's happening, and let us feel, like, oh, I'm like seeing the monarch butterflies and the praying mantis, and I'm like, like all these things. And then, like, look at those luscious vegetables that are growing, that I can't wait to eat. And, so that's an example. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you, I know this is not a lot of time, but I'm going to give you like 9 minutes to this. So like about 3 minutes each. And then if you're in a group of two, then you get like 5 minutes or 4.5 minutes each, right? So time yourself and make sure that everybody gets a chance to talk. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and open all the rooms and go to it. Yay, we're all back. So I'd love to hear just, from at least one or two of you, like, how was it? How was that process? How's your group? Was it fun? Did you learn anything? Have any questions? Yeah, I'd love to hear some. Yeah, Lesia, please.
Yes, it was super fun. And it was challenging to stay in the present moment and not say, I'm going to, we're going to, and then just right, or this is what's happening. I found it challenging to not sort of tell the story rather than like be in the story and be in the and I feel like this would be easier for me if I were writing than just speaking off the top of my head. So that was really interesting, and it was delightful hearing from Carrie and from Glenn what their stories were and their experiences were. So yeah, really interesting and fun experience. Thank you.
I love that. Did anyone else have a challenge with that, like staying in the present moment and saying I'm going to, and then, or found it you might write more easily than actually speak something like this? Yeah. Yeah, because and that's why this is a practice, right? Because so if you're having it challenging, then it's like, okay, good. This is an opportunity to practice doing this. See my positive reframing I just did, so that we could actually, like lean into because the way that the mind responds, it responds to it doesn't matter whether something is real or imagined. The mind just says, okay, it is what it is, right? So that as you start to even imagine these feelings and being in the present moment, we're actually bringing those experiences alive in us. And so then part of it is when I talk about training your mind so that when you have those experiences, it almost becomes like a form of muscle memory. I don't know if that's not the correct term, but like when you do something over and over again, it's like, oh yeah, I already know how to do it. So I already did that. So now it's just like, what Glenn was talking about, expectation. Oh yeah, I already played that out in my mind. So that's the expectation now that I have of what's going to happen in this experience. So thank you for that, Lesia. Anybody else just want to share like what they got out of this, what was interesting, what was challenging? Um, I am gonna pick Glenn. Yes,
Just a
go
quick
ahead.
thing. I was laughing to myself thinking, oh, I don't think he'll put Lassie and I in the same group. That would be potentially because I thought, what if we have the same thing we're gonna plan? We
Yeah.
didn't in the end, but it was like, why am I comparing here? Why am I assuming that my vision isn't as rich? But Lassie speaks for a living and like imagines and just on the fly. So I'm like,
Yeah.
hmm, I I'll just do what I do. But it ended up being a different family trip anyway. So thank
Well,
you, woman.
I love that. And you know what? I didn't plan it. Zoom just did it for me.
Okay.
And then it was afterwards, I'm like, hey, they're in the same group. Like
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that was fine. So good, good, good. Well, yeah, so this is another practice that you could actually play around with, right? This idea of scripting and yeah, writing it is also very good practice. And speaking it out loud is also a good practice. And like I said, you could do this for like before you have a conversation with someone, before you and I'm inviting you to practice with doing something that you already feel like is going to be easy or nice because I want you to get into the practice. It's hard to do it if you're like, oh, I'm going to have this challenging conversation and now let me plan the most beautiful. It's like, no, let's like let's get the practice down first and then you could start to ease in towards more challenging stuff, right? So that's the word. Amy, yes, please.
I had a thought while Richard and I were doing our sharing, and it just occurred to me that I was doing a holiday that I planned to take with a friend, and I thought, maybe my friend and I should do this together before we go, so that we're creating something together. And I'd never thought of doing that before. And then the other thing that we're doing there, we're creating the positive energy, but also kind of sharing what our visions are, So like I might say something that she hadn't thought of, or vice versa, and then we're like, you know, so that occurred to me when Glenn was talking about he and Lesia being in the same group, and I thought, oh, I could do that with Shauna. So I
I
thought
like
that was
that.
cool. Yeah. I
Yeah,
also
thank
had
you.
a couple of, I don't know if it's the right time, but I had a couple of things to add maybe to the how to train your mind
Yeah, please.
in case they're valuable. One is, this is just something that I found for myself and people in my life, that in terms of reframing, sometimes it's best for me and for some other people to offer myself compassion for where I am first and then reframe. Because if I don't, I might kind of jump over something or try to push myself into a different place. And you might have said that, but I didn't hear it. So I wanted to bring that up in case it's helpful. And then the other thing is that, like Richard had said earlier, the opening yourself to your senses and, opening to all the senses. And you can do that like to whatever is in the moment. And what you unconsciously are doing is beginning to identify with the neutral witness as you witness all the different aspects of your being. Like, what's my emotional body like? What's my thought body? What's my spirit? What are all the senses? And by the time you've witnessed all of that, it's like there's nothing left but the witness. So it leaves you in a bit of a more neutral state, I've found. And then the other thing is that you can use a memory in that way, like you're talking about, a positive memory. And you can utilize that witnessing all those different aspects, like as if you're there, So like if I'm at the beach, I feel the sand under my feet, I smell the salt air, I hear a dog barking, and I see a sunset, and it makes it very vivid. And you had said vivid, but I found that to be a really helpful practice for making it more vivid
I
myself.
love
So
that.
I wanted to share that with you guys in case it's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, those are beautiful. And yeah, there's something about really bringing our awareness to be very present to all of our different senses and our bodies, and just to be present in the present moment. And yeah, I really appreciate that point about offering compassion first, right, to yourself first. And then just recognizing, okay, this is where I'm at. And so if you're in a place where you're wanting to shift your state, then you want to be able to um, just say, like, where I'm at is okay, and I get to choose, where do I want to be somewhere different or not, right? We get to choose. So, and then yeah, the thing about doing this with your friend too, I think that's a brilliant idea. Here's the one point I just want to make also, is that there's something called outlining that is just something to be mindful of. Outlining is where we draw out a picture of what something is going to look like. But what outlining means, like, we become rigid in saying that's how it has to be, And so if it doesn't turn out that way, then I'm mad. or like it's not the way that I had planned it out. And so it's almost like you visualize, you write, you script in a way that allows these feelings, but then you're also have a detachment about it that says, one of my favorite phrases, this or something better, right? Like, I want this, or there could be something better that I'm open to here. So like, just be open to that as you do this, but feel into like the feelings, and yeah, and write it out. Just like, if it could be the best possible thing that it could be, what does it look and feel like, and in the present tense. So I want to just share a couple other things as we start to wrap up here. One is, there are some other cognitive biases that I wanted you to be aware of, and this is just something just to note, because negativity bias is called a cognitive bias, and we have, like, I think, identified about at least 180 cognitive biases. And so, like, why we think the way that we do. So these are just interesting things to note that I wanted to share with you. One is this confirmation bias. So that this means that we have a tendency to focus only on information that reinforces what we already believe. So that if something goes against what we believe, then we tend to poo-poo it as like, oh yeah, like, I don't believe that, or that's not true. And so confirmation bias says, like, let me just focus on that, right? That's one kind of bias. Another bias that exists is something called the outcome bias, where we judge how good a decision is that we made solely based on its outcome, not based on its reasoning. So that could mean, like, I decided to do this, and because it didn't turn out the way that I wanted to do it, then it was a bad decision. Well, you know, it says, well, what if we made the best decision that we could in that moment, right? And what if there was something in the journey that you learned in that decision, right? So outcome bias says, like, just re-looking at how you judge something, whether or not it's like good or not, um, and don't only place it based on its outcome. And then here's another one that you might relate to. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. And that means where you're afraid to change something because you've already invested a lot into it, even if it's not worth it anymore, right? And so it's like, oh, I've been like doing this already so long that I can't stop now, even though I hate doing it. But I like invested all this time. And you see, like, you know, like a lot of people who are in jobs that they hate, like they said, or careers that they don't like I've already been doing this even though I don't like it, right? And so I'm gonna stick with it because I'd have to start all over again, right? It's interesting, right? These different confirmation cognitive biases that exist. So this is just a fun little tidbit here. So here is your assignment for the next 7 days. Your assignment is to practice one positive activity every day for the next 7 days. So you get to choose gratitude, um, listening to the birds, like um, what else did I? Mindfulness, meditation, affirmative prayer, reframing, being intentional about your environment. You know, so just practice one thing that you want to try. Scripting, you could do this, doing this with your friend Shauna, you know, like, so this is one thing that you could practice. So this is your assignment, okay? And so what else do I have? Oh yeah, so on the sheet here, write down this again, this is your handy dandy sheet. Write down your learning or insight from today, an action step that you could take. And then, as I said, you could always email me to let me know how you're doing with this, okay? And then, so next gathering is going to be in November. The reason why is because Richard and I are going to be in Europe on a cruise, leaving out of London. I know it was actually a deal that we couldn't pass up. Like like 12 days in Europe for like $300 each. Like couldn't pass that up. So we're like, so we're doing that. And then this next gathering is not the first Saturday in November. It's the second Saturday because we're actually also going to be doing some election work that first weekend here in the United States. So this one is, we're actually going to do something different. It's called the spiritual practice of Visio Divina, and it's called Encountering the Divine Through Art and Imagery. And so this is like, some of you may, I don't know if you've ever heard of this practice. Some of you might have heard of Lectio Divina, but yeah, this is just a different kind of practice that I thought would be good to introduce you to. And part of it is because I've been wanting to teach some different spiritual practices specifically, and I think this is one that a lot of people have not encountered before. So I'm looking forward to it. So mark that on your calendars, November 9th. We're taking a break for October. And then I'm also wanting to talk with people, get your feedback on the journey itself, just like how things are going and like whether or not you like the monthly or taking a couple months off. So I'll like you could send me an email, but I'll also send out a survey to everyone as well to just get your thoughts too, and also talking with people as well. Okay. And so as we start to wrap up here, let's go ahead and take a moment for our takeaways. I know that we're getting a little bit over time, but let's just go ahead and just take a moment just go around quickly and just share, like, what are you taking away? What's one thing that you learned or one thing that you liked about our time today? So I'm going to just call on people and I'm going to go according to my screen here. So let's start with Lesia. You are the first one. Yes.
Thank you. I really appreciate a couple of things that Amy had to offer today. And I mean, for myself, but also like with my community and the clients that I work with. And the one that really stood out was I have a choice, but do I want to choose? And that's just really acknowledging where people are at in the moment and not skipping over or spiritual bypassing anything. And so it was just a really beautiful reminder. Thank you, Amy.
Oh, thank you. Let's give Lesia a hand. Yay. And Amy. So, all right, let's go to who's next? Antoinette, come on down.
I actually was gonna say the same thing about choice, just remembering that you have that choice and having compassion for yourself. And the one real takeaway too is just the scripting that I will really implement into my practice. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's give Antoinette a hand. Yay. All right. Next, we will have Carrie.
Hello. Yes, I really like the scripting. Especially I think I was given an experience of a last minute trip we have coming up for a concert, and I'm usually like a very casual, easy traveler, but this I really like this. Like it was not about the necessarily like the things to do on the trip, but the whole overall how I'm gonna feel about it, which was really nice. So thank you.
Yay. Thank you, Carrie. Let's give Carrie a hand. Yay. All right. So let's remove Carrie's pin and we have Glenn.
Okay, I definitely appreciate the scripting tool. And oh, my screen just did something. Overall, I think I'm just really appreciating being back in this community where there's this tendency towards I know it can be better. Because I am more, and just hearing so many examples of that from people's, and it's just like it's coming from everyone here, that it's like, yeah, we know we can do better, and we're going to get into those habits and dwell less in the doom and the doubt and all that. So yeah, I just really thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's
Thank
give
you all.
Glenn. Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Next we have Amy.
Yeah, I really like the scripting too. And what I had never thought of doing with that before is, when I'm making this is what I'm going to do today, and my plan, and then to add in every morning, really every day, well, this is the experience that I'm going to have, how I feel, how, my senses and my emotions and my thought clarity and stuff like that. I think that would be fantastic to add that in every day. Just let it be a natural part of my daily plan. I love that. And also, may I say that I love Mandana's background. Is that a real background? Is that where you really are? Oh, well, I've really enjoyed looking at it the whole time. It's brought me a lot of pleasure. So thank you for having that.
Yay, let's give Amy a hand. Yay, thank you, Amy. And then, so since she talked about Mandana, let's go ahead and go to Mandana.
This whole topic for me is so interesting and so fascinating. And I think it's really empowering to remember that we have the ability to retrain our minds, our thoughts, our perceptions, because I think it's so easy to forget that we're so, generally speaking, hardwired and conditioned to be predisposed to certain ways of viewing things. And it's really helpful to remember that even if it's difficult in the moment, even when you're going through the thick of it, you can stop for a second and remember, hey, I don't have to stay in this feeling or this thought. I can retrain over time and choose a different perspective. So I think that's just mind blowing and just really interesting to me.
I love that. Let's give Mandana a hand. Yay. And then let's go to Heather.
I think as a result of today's time together, I want to reframe the way I think about my negativity bias with gratitude and just embrace it. Like appreciate what it's doing for me and then quickly move on to like what I want to do intentionally.
I love
Yeah.
that. Thank you. Let's give Heather a hand. All right. And then let's go to Richard.
I love this session. I really love the scripting part. You know, I talk a lot about for myself about envisioning. And so I think scripting is much more intentional. It's much more of it's much more intentional. And it allows me to focus in a little bit more on the envisioning part. And I thought this was such a great session that we didn't even notice that in the last 15 minutes, there were 2 earthquakes, one at 4.1 and the second at 3.5 based out of Ontario. So
Wow.
it is Mother Nature and we get to enjoy it by not feeling it. So just want to share. Thank you for this great session today.
Thank you, Richard. Yay. And thank you, Mother Nature, right? So, yes. Did I get everybody? Yes. Yes. Okay, good. Good. All right. And so, yeah, this was a really beautiful session. I'm glad that it's nice to have everyone back here together again. And yeah, and then yeah, put it on your calendar November 9th for that one. That one's actually going to be a fun session. And I'm actually going to reach out to you and invite you if you'd like to send me an artwork or image, and then we'll get to choose which ones we want to use for our practice together. Yes, and yay! Okay, so let me share and roll us out with our closing prayer. So back to my new song that I like to play. All right, so let's go ahead and take a deep breath, breathing in and out. And let's bring forth that sense of gratitude. Just giving thanks for our time together, giving thanks for being in this blessed, loving community, giving thanks for all the insights and the shares, and to see all of life as a blessing. That even this negativity bias is something that serves us, and that always we get to choose how it is that we want to live and express our lives. And whatever we choose is okay. Let's allow us some compassion for that and know that at any moment we get to choose again and again and again. Because that's what life is all about, this wonderful gift of free will and choice, that we get to experience life on our own terms, not by anybody else's terms. And so that's what the point is of this whole abundant good journey is this recognition that each one of us is on a never-ending journey where we get to explore all of life's goodness and deliciousness in just the way that we want. And it's all okay. And so I know that as we leave here, each one of us is blessed, guided, loved, and embraced. And for this, I give a great big thanks. And so I just release my word knowing all is done and all is well, and that we leave here uplifted and buoyed up by the divine's love and presence that loves us so very much. And so with that, I just simply let it be. And with that, take a deep breath in and out. And then open your eyes. And then you know what I like to do. We could now say our ta-tas and farewells. Unmute yourself and thank you all for joining.
Bye.
Bye. Nice
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Great
Bye.
seeing
Next time.
everybody.